Lila Turner stepped into the grand wedding hall, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on her even. Though she knew most of them were only there to celebrate the bride, she adjusted her dress nervously and gripped the strap of her purse tightly. As she moved toward a table in the corner, hoping to stay invisible because she had learned long ago that people saw her first for her size and not for anything else. She carried inside the room, buzzed with laughter and chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft melody of the wedding music filling the air, and for a brief moment Lila allowed herself to breathe in the warmth of the celebration. Until a sharp giggle cut through the music and she felt a wave of discomfort as a group of bridesmaids at a nearby table leaned toward each other, pointing their fingers in her direction, while whispering comments that were loud enough for anyone near them to hear. She felt her cheeks burn, and she lowered her eyes, pretending not to notice their laughter. But it followed her like a shadow every step she took toward the buffet, and every bite she took at her plate seemed to draw another comment, another snicker from their table, as though they could not resist the urge to humiliate someone smaller and quieter than themselves, and a knot tightened in her stomach because she had no one here to defend her, and no one seemed willing to speak. Upa's sudden movement at the edge of the room caught her attention, and she saw a man standing near the entrance of the hall, his posture calm but commanding, his eyes scanning the room with a focus that seemed almost unnatural, and she could not place it, but something about him gave her a strange sense of hope, as if he could see what was happening and understand it without needing a single word. Yet she did not dare imagine he would step in for her. The group of bridesmaids grew bolder, their laughter louder and more pointed now, mocking her appearance, directly saying cruel things about her body weight, and even gesturing in ways that made the entire table shift uncomfortably. And for a moment, Lila felt trapped, surrounded by eyes that were laughing and judging, and she realized that if nothing changed soon, this humiliation would only escalate, leaving her completely exposed. She tried to focus on the music and the conversation at her table, but the sting of their words kept pulling her attention back toward them, and she could hear other guests whispering glances toward her, and the group, as if unsure whether they should intervene or join in, and a sinking feeling spread through her, because she knew very few people cared enough to step forward, and the tension in the room seemed to thrum like a quiet warning. Then she saw him move again, the man who had been standing near the door. He stepped closer to the table. Her eyes flicked to his face, and she noticed a calm determination that seemed to radiate from him, as if he had a plan for this moment, and she felt her heart lift slightly because she sensed that someone would finally stand up for her, and that the tide of fear and embarrassment could turn into something entirely different. Bridesmaids noticed him too, and one of them leaned toward the others with a smirk, saying something loud enough for him to hear, and he stopped in his tracks, his gaze settling on them as if he had measured their confidence and found it weak, and the room seemed to pause for a moment, the music fading slightly in the background, as every pair of eyes shifted toward this unexpected figure whose presence alone demanded attention, and Lila felt a thrill of hope she had not dared to imagine. He walked toward the table with measured steps, and each footfall seemed to draw the laughter out of the group, slowly fading into an uneasy silence, as if the very air had changed, and Lila could hardly breathe, because she knew that something was about to happen that could either humiliate her further or completely turn the situation on its head, leaving everyone in the room unsure what the next moment would hold. Finally, he reached their table, and he spoke in a low, calm voice, words meant not to yell or threaten, but to expose the cruelty and remind them of their own humanity. And the group faltered, their smirks fading as a ripple of unease spread across them, because they were not used to being challenged, and certainly not in a way that demanded their attention without raising a hand or causing a scene. And Lila felt her body relax slightly, even as her heart raced with anticipation of what would happen next. Other guests began to murmur softly, the tension in the room growing thicker as people realized that someone had taken a stand, and the bridesmaids looked around nervously as if wondering who else might intervene and whether the room would side with them or with the unexpected defender now standing beside. Leela and she could not help but glance at him and wonder who he was, why he cared, and how far he would go to protect her from the ridicule that had followed her like a shadow for so long. Leela took a deep breath and straightened in her chair, the weight of embarrassment slowly lifting as she realized that she was no longer completely alone in this moment, and that the presence of this stranger who had stepped forward with calm authority had changed the energy in the entire hall, leaving everyone present holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next and whether the night would end in humiliation or in an unexpected victory that no one had anticipated. The man stood beside Leela, his presence calm and steady, yet powerful enough to command the attention of the entire wedding hall, and the bridesmaids shifted nervously in their seats, unsure whether to laugh or run because they had never faced someone who did not flinch at their cruelty, and the air in the room seemed to thicken with anticipation, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what would happen. Next, he leaned slightly forward and spoke to them in a voice low and controlled that carried across the table without raising in anger, and he asked them if they truly believed mocking someone for their size made them better people, and for the first time the laughter died completely, leaving a cold silence that settled like a weight on every guest present, and Leela felt a flicker of hope that the nightmare might finally end. One of the bridesmaids opened her mouth to respond, but words faltered on her tongue as the man continued to speak, his eyes steady on each of them in turn, as if reading their insecurities and failures, and the guests began to murmur quietly among themselves, unsure how to react to this quiet authority, and Leela sat straighter, her heart pounding as she realized she was no longer facing the ridicule alone, and that someone had her back in a way she had never imagined. The bridesmaids glanced at each other, panic growing as they realized their usual tactics would not work. The more they tried to hide their fear, the more it showed in their flushed faces and trembling hands, and the man beside Leela remained calm, steady, and unyielding like a wall of protection, and she could feel the tension in the room shift from humiliation to suspense and expectation, leaving her breathless with anticipation. He finally turned toward Leela and offered a reassuring smile, a small gesture that carried more power than words could express, and she met his gaze feeling a surge of courage and confidence that had been buried under years of self-doubt and past mockery, and in that instant she realized that she was ready to stand up for herself, with someone she trusted by her side, but she could not yet see the full extent of what was about to unfold. The bridesmaids attempted one last joke, trying to regain control of the room, but the man did not flinch. Instead, he stepped slightly closer, and his voice remained calm, but carried a sharp edge that left no room for argument, and the sound of it seemed to ripple through the hall, freezing the mockers in place, and the guests watched silently, unsure whether to intervene or simply witness the confrontation that had grown more tense with each passing second. Then the unthinkable happened. The man reached out and gestured gently for Leela to rise, and she did so, trembling slightly at first, but with growing confidence as he guided her forward to the center of the room, and the bridesmaids took a step back, realizing too late that they had underestimated her presence and the support that now surrounded her. And the hall seemed to hold its breath as everyone waited for what would come next. Leela spoke softly at first, but her words grew stronger with each sentence, addressing the cruelty and the unfairness she had endured, and the room fell silent as the weight of her honesty struck. The guests and even the mockers were forced to confront their actions, and she felt a warmth rise inside her, knowing she was no longer just a victim, but a voice commanding respect and attention. Leaving suspense hanging in the air about how far the impact of this moment would reach, the man beside her gave a small nod and stepped back, allowing her to shine on her own. And Leela felt her courage swell. She smiled, and the energy in the room shifted completely from tension to admiration, and the guests began to clap softly at first, and then louder as they recognized the bravery she displayed and the bridesmaids. Shrank in shame, unable to respond, while Lila finally felt a sense of triumph. She had never known leaving. The hall suspended in awe, waiting for the next ripple of change that would follow this unforgettable moment.